Constantinople, the city of the world's desires, known throughout history by many names, from the first settlement of Lygos to Old Byzantion, Roman Constantinople, and finally Istanbul. For more than 3,000 years, humans have lived in this area on the banks of the Bosphorus, with a long and exciting history, one which we shall cover in this video. The location where Constantinople would one day be founded was settled in the 15th century BCE by Proto-Thracian tribes newly arrived to the lands of modern-day Bulgaria. It was one of these tribes that founded a small settlement by the shores of the Bosphorus Straits, under the name of Lygos. By the 7th century BCE, the Greek city-states had begun colonization efforts around the Aegean Sea and the larger Mediterranean. The Dorian city of Megara in the Isthmus of Corinth would attempt to colonize the area where Lygos stood. According to Hesychius, Megara launched the expedition after consulting with the oracle of Delphi, who told them, "Blessed are those who dwell in the sacred city, by the narrow Thracian shore at the mouth of the Pontus, where two whelps drink from the hollow sea, where both fish and deer graze at the same pasture." Guided by the oracle's prophecy, the colonists founded a small city close to the old Thracian Lygos, and named it Byzantion. The origins of this name are unclear, with differing theories and possible sources. However, according to Hesychius, the city was named in honour of the first leader of the city, Byzos, son of King Nisos of Megara. Byzantion's early period of prosperity and wealth would be cut short by the arrival of a powerful foreign empire to its doorstep. The Persian Empire had grown with the conquest of Cyrus and his successors, and when the Scythians disrupted Persian trade, Darius, the King of Kings, did not hesitate in conquering Byzantion and Macedon to clear a path for his armies. This war would end in failure for the Persians, as they were unable to face the Scythians, who made great use of their mobility to avoid confrontations. Byzantion would remain a Persian vassal until the Greco-Persian Wars, when, in 449 BCE, the Greek cities under Achaemenid rule were liberated. Having secured its independence, Byzantion resumed its trading practices with the rest of the Greek world, and entered into the Athenian-led Delian League. This decision would end up being a double-edged sword, as it dragged Byzantion into the Peloponnesian War. Byzantion had a fundamental role in the Athenian war effort, as it controlled access to the grain shipments that came from the Black Sea that kept the Athenians fed. Sparta, in an attempt to starve Athens, attacked and took Byzantion. This would start a period in Byzantion's history where the city was conquered by Sparta and Athens 4 times, until in 404 BCE, when Athens finally surrendered to Sparta. The end of the war did not bring about many changes in Byzantion. They remained under Spartan control for nearly 2 decades, and the Thracians to the north were threatening to raid the city. Thankfully, the Spartans helped Byzantion drive off the Thracians, and in 390 BCE, Byzantion was freed from Spartan influence, this time for good. At last, Byzantion prospered as a major trading hub thanks to its control of the Bosphorus and access to the Black Sea and its colonies. Unfortunately for the city, it was unable to achieve total hegemony over the flow of Bosporan trade. What stood in the way of Byzantion was the city of Chalcedon, oftentimes called the City of the Blind, because even though it was settled before Byzantion, its settlers chose a less advantageous position on the other side of the strait. This rivalry would last until the conquest of Chalcedon by Byzantion in the middle of the 4th century BCE. By the later 4th century, the Thracians would once again threaten Byzantion, and this time it would be Macedon to come to its aid. Led by the ambitious King Philip II, who sought to establish an empire of his own, after dealing with the Thracians, Philip would go to war with the cities of Athens and Thebes, and he would demand that Byzantion cut the grain shipments from crossing the Bosphorus, seeking to repeat the Spartan actions of a century past. Byzantium refused to do so, and was besieged by an enraged Philip who sought to conquer the city for good. Fortunately for Byzantium, the city would hold out until the Persian Empire became involved, and demanded that Philip make peace with Byzantium as the war threatened trade in the Bosphorus. Threatened by the much larger and powerful empire, Philip would relent. However, in the end, one could say Philip had the last laugh, as his son, Alexander, conquered the city before crossing into Anatolia in what would become his famous conquest of the Persian Empire. Alexander's fate is well known. After creating the largest empire the world had ever seen, he would die in Babylon at the young age of 32. After his death, his generals would divide his empire between themselves. These generals would later be known as the Diadochi, the successors, and from them, new Hellenistic kingdoms would flourish in the eastern Mediterranean. Byzantium, for its part, was able to flourish into a trading hub by, once more, controlling the Bosphorus and demanding exorbitant fees out of passing vessels. Apart from a brief conflict with Rhodes over the demanded fees, Byzantium would remain at relative peace. This conflict would ultimately end with a settlement in 220 BCE, where Byzantium agreed to lower its fees. As the Hellenistic age came to a close, the story of Byzantium would radically change as a new empire was emerging from the west. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to our Imperator level patron, Fernando Lopez Ojeda. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for more great historical content. Also, feel free to check out our Discord and Patreon, linked in the description below.